The Andrew Lake Podcast.
Now in collaboration with Acid Quote Tees.
Feel the rhythm now.
10,000 years!
All connected.
All aboard the Dosterland Express. Welcome back to the Andrew Lake Podcast. My name is Doster. Very pleased to be with you. Can you feel the inspiration in the air? Can you see the beauty all around? Can you soak in this? What makes me speechless? What makes me just marvel at the radiance that is in everything? And of course, we've got the acid quote of the day. How big is your everything? This is sort of related to a previous quote that we had, which was, everything means everything. That was episode number 6. Acid quote number 6. Everything means everything. This is acid quote number 10. We've made it to double digits. Can you believe it already? How is time passing? I have no idea how time is passing. And it passes in a number of different ways. It's quite interesting. It goes big, it goes small, it goes around, it goes with, well, most of the time it's quite smooth, sometimes it's not. And if I really pay attention to it, I have no idea how this time rolls on. Time waits for no man. That will go in the classic book of quotes, the book of classic quotes. In this channel, on this podcast, we're taking quotes from the acid book of quotes, not to be confused with the philosophical book of quotes, or the things your uncle says book of quotes, or the historical moments, anything like that. No, we're specializing. Someone told me I have to specialize. How big is your everything? Now, when I say everything, what does that mean to you? Like, what do you understand as all to be? All the universe? All you have to lose? All you have experienced? Now, in a sense, it is a bit of a thing because all you have is always proportionally the biggest thing you have, right? It's always everything. It's always the totality. And yet you get a sense from this, from those moments in life where things have expanded for you, when things have become bigger, when the sense of everything has become bigger. And this is what's so inspiring about learning the ways of the stars and the planets and the distant galaxies, right? When someone whips out a beautiful fact of the stars, of how big stars can be and how far away the Andromeda galaxy or any other galaxy is, you just become like, whoa, there's a thing that touches upon you, which is like, whoa, that is so big. That is so much of everything. You can also get a sense of this when you feel the feeling that someone has about their life when they've experienced more than you. I've spent a lot of time overseas, and it's been great to meet people who are also travelers, and you meet a lot of different types of people when you travel. Many different backgrounds, you hear lots of stories, you hear people with a lot of different attitudes, and I've been very fortunate to make friends with people who were older than me, a lot of people who were later in their years on this planet. And talking to them, well, it's always different depending on who it is, but you get a sense of how different they feel towards their own experiences. It's a little bit nuanced because really you do have to have a certain amount of experience. And you do have to have a certain amount of exploration and new things and trying things that you want to try. But really, as you get older, as you move on into deeper experiences and wider experiences, there's a tipping point where it's like, well, you have to understand your connection to those experiences, your understanding, your way of integrating those experiences. Because sometimes when you talk to older people, they don't have those experiences still with them. You know that they've lived, they've been around for a long time, they've done things, there's no doubt about it. And yet they can't recall it. It's not as if it was there yesterday. Now, for some people, it is as though it was there yesterday. Some people in their older years are very much full of gratitude for all they have experienced, for all they have been through and all they have, well, survived in hardships and also experienced in beauty and love and the meaningful moments of life. And in fact, a lot of the time, the people that don't say much, well, I mean, this isn't really a hard and fast rule. Sometimes people don't say much about their experiences because they don't know how to say it. Sometimes they don't say much because they don't have the experience. And sometimes they don't say much because they have it and they have experienced it, but they feel no need to prove that they have. They feel no need to convey that they have. And I'm remembering this story now, or this, not story, but this moment I had when I was in India and I was living at this meditation resort. It was Osho's meditation resort, the Osho International Meditation Resort. And that's where I've done most of my awareness intensives that I keep talking about. And it was an amazing time. I've been back and forth between there and Australia over the years, and it's been absolutely life-changing to be involved in that community. And anyway, as I was living there, like I was saying, you meet a lot of different people, travelers from around the world, people with different walks of life and different backgrounds and on different journeys, different discoveries and different adventures. And I remember this one guy, I mean, I remember a lot of people, but this one guy is coming to mind now, where I was sitting having a conversation with a friend, and this guy sort of came up and joined in and started talking to us. And his conversation stick, his thing that he was sort of putting out to me and my friend and everyone around us, and everyone he met really, was that he'd been to 193 countries in 2 years or something like that, right? And he'd been traveling for 2 years constantly, and he'd been to over, almost 200 countries. And it was like, wow, okay, so you've experienced so much. And his story was, or his situation was, that he was actually a Wall Street investor. So he had big money, and he was traveling the world with his girlfriend, or his wife, his partner. And she was there also. And she had also mentioned this sort of conversation topic of like, we've been to almost 200 countries in the last 2 years. And that, how do I say this? It's like, you think that would be this beautiful thing. You would think, wow, what amazing experience. Wow, what mind-bogglingly, openingly, transformationally you must feel and you must be. And it wasn't with this guy. With this guy, he sort of came in and he sat down and he joined this conversation with me and my friend, and we had been talking about love and our experiences of a recent group that we'd done, and we were talking about relationships, and we were talking about, this really meaningful stuff. And he had joined and he'd sort of, had this thing, I've been to 193 countries. And as we'd been talking, he'd actually got into a tangle with us, and he ended up arguing with us. And it was so obvious that me and my friend, we were not interested in arguing, and we weren't biting, and we weren't holding anything against him. Like, from what I could see, we were just having a conversation. And yet this guy so quickly got into a tangle. And it ended with this Wall Street investor, like, standing up in a huff and getting really stroppy and then walking away, but then stopping, coming back and looking straight at me and my friend and saying to us, you know what us Wall Street investors think of you guys? You guys are losers, right? And me and my friend, like, we didn't, like, it just bounced off us because we knew that he was in a tangle. We knew that he was just in his own little thing. We just met the guy, right? He didn't know anything about us. And anyway, he stormed off, and me and my friend we actually laughed, and that made him even more angry. And it turned into, a bit of a drama, but, we were able to de-escalate it and left. And eventually he left, and like, whatever, people like that don't stay around long. So, yeah, and I don't like telling these sort of stories too much because I like to share more about the beautiful side of people. But sometimes we do need to actually, illustrate the dark side and the tangles of people so that we don't fall into these traps. And the funny thing about this situation with this Wall Street investor turning to us and saying, "You guys are losers." The funny thing was that my friend that I was talking to, he was actually very rich, right? He owned his own house. He had multiple investment properties. He had this huge, raging business, as well as multiple smaller businesses that he'd been telling me about. And, he had like some pretty big money, right? Some decent money. And his story was similar to people who reach that stage in life, which is that, eventually you just go, well, I don't have to do any of this. I'm just going to let my employees run the businesses and the investment properties do what they do, and I'm going to travel the world. And he'd been traveling the world for, a couple of years. He'd probably even been to as many countries as this Wall Street investor guy, right? So, but you wouldn't have got that out of my friend unless you'd actually talk to him in a meaningful way, right? It wasn't this thing that he put out onto people. It wasn't this thing that he projected into conversations from the get-go. And of course, this Wall Street guy, this big shot, had no idea about this about my friend. So he was completely wrong, and he could never have found out. And it's like, well, look at this. Like, what's the difference? You've got two people, and they've both traveled the world. They've both got big money. Good for them. And yet, what it all means to them, what it's done for them, are two very different things. And what's the difference? What's the difference? Because this Wall Street guy, it was just like, I remember it ended up thinking like, oh my goodness, this guy is so dumb and so incapable of like forming a meaningful relationship with a stranger. Like if you've been to 193 countries, you would have met, you would think, you would assume, it's safe to assume that you would have met so many strangers, talked about yourself and talked about others so much that you would have basic skills in like getting to know someone, right? That's just basic skills. That's just practice with connecting with people from different countries, with talking about yourself and talking about your day and talking about whatever. And I'm absolutely sure, I'm absolutely certain that if this Wall Street guy had have sat down with me and my friend and he had have, listened and joined the conversation and it had have been an organic flowing, he would have been perfectly accepted. We would have been perfectly fine talking to him. We would have been happy to hear about his story. Like, wow, I mean, it's a great story. 193 countries in 2 years. Wow, what a life. Wall Street investor, multi-millionaire. Wow, what's that like? I have no idea. I can only imagine. And then later on, I actually, this Wall Street guy was around for a couple of days, and I even talked to his girlfriend a bit. We sort of crossed paths and bumped into each other, and it was funny because when I talked to her, and she was saying certain things about me, about her. About him, about her husband, it was like she knew what he was like and she had just learnt to deal with it. And she was just fine with letting him be like that. And she even kind of came up to, she didn't apologize like over the top, like, oh, sorry that my husband's an asshole. It wasn't like that. It was more subtle. It was almost like she was diffusing his reputation and making herself look like she wanted to acknowledge that she knew what he was like, right? She knew that he was this way and that it was not very good and that she was not like that. So it's like, damn, man, you've got millions of dollars. You've been around the world and your own wife thinks you're an asshole at the core of it. And it really does get me to thinking, like, what does it all mean to you? Like, what does everything that you have mean to you? Like, if you've got $10 million, what does that mean to you? Like, is that something that you project out? Is that your pride? Is that something that makes you just feel better than other people? Or is it something that makes you feel gratitude? Is it something that brings you more meaningful experiences? Is it something that is very much a part of your story? And can you see that your experiences are very much something that you must connect with? You must integrate. You must relate to, right? We talk about it in such an abstract way, as experience is this part within us. And yet it is so close to home. It is so close to the skin. And this process, well, I mean, how do you do this? I mean, what's the difference? I mean, the difference is meditation, right? If you're doing meditation, you're doing awareness techniques, and you're opening your heart, you are actually learning to connect with people. And it doesn't matter if you've been to 193 countries or just one country. If you learn to open your heart and you learn to listen to people's stories, your experience means more to you. You know, you can go to 193 countries and see the inside of a hotel room. It would look very similar in all of those countries, if not the same, right? And yet, you can go into the city and you can meet people in your own country, or you can join an organization or a social group and meet all sorts of people and have all sorts of experiences in understanding their story and their background. And that is the difference. Well, it's the difference of meditation. It's the difference of intelligence. The difference of knowing that this is a path we are walking on. This is a process that we are involved in. We are opening our hearts. We are learning to understand. We are coming into love. We are removing the barriers within ourselves that stop us from being better people, from being people that can appreciate someone who's different, someone who doesn't have millions of dollars in the bank. And it does take practice, right? You do have to learn these things. Like learning the piano. If you don't sit down at the piano, you're never going to be able to play the piano. And there is a lot I need to say about practice. Practice is a lifelong thing. Practice is a lifelong commitment. So probably more I will have to say on that. So here's the question, how big is your everything? Everything that means something to you. And I mean everything in every sense of the word. Like everything means everything. Like every experience that you've had. Every experience that you've felt. Every experience that is impressed upon you. And you really do sense this when you talk to someone who's different to you. Whether they're older or younger, or they are from a different economic background with a different economic advantage or disadvantage. So that's why I'm sharing here my stories with you. This is my hope, to talk about my experiences and to share with the world. So sending you the love, hoping you're feeling fine, feeling good, and just loving this moment, baby. Oh man, it just never stops. It never stops how good this is. It just keeps getting good and good and good. Head on over to the Etsy store. We'll be back very soon with more Andrew Lake Podcast. Have a beautiful day. See ya.